Okay, let's read another newspaper article and see if we can find some good grammar and vocabulary. Let's see if we can expand our vocabulary and improve our grammar. So, rare and unusual cancers are emerging after the COVID pandemic, and doctors fear an unlikely culprit is to blame. Let's read further. Doctors across the US are reporting an alarming health trend in the wake of the COVID pandemic. Now, in the wake of is exactly the same as in the aftermath of. It means after something. A wake is actually, it's a wave that follows a boat, which is why you have wakeboarding. Yeah, it's a type of water sport, wakeboarding. So in the wake of means in the aftermath of. It means after, simply after. In the aftermath of means after. In the wake of means after. So doctors across the US are reporting an alarming health trend in the wake of the COVID pandemic. Since about 2021, they have been noticing rare and unusual cancers in patients who shouldn't fit the bill. Okay, if you fit the bill, then you are suited to this. And so when it says patients who shouldn't fit the bill, it means patients who don't usually get cancer. So of course they are talking about young people here. It's usually older people who get cancer, and young people don't fit the bill for cancer. Yeah, they're not the typical patient. They're not the typical cancer patient. Many of them young and without any family history of the disease. So they've got no cancer in their family, and suddenly they're getting cancer at a very young age. And they're coming down with, look at that, that's a phrasal verb, and you normally come down with flu or COVID or a cold, but here they're coming down with obscure forms of the disease that typically affect seniors in their 70s and 80s. So do notice that we often call old people seniors, and that came up in the previous article as well, including hard to pronounce ones like cholangiocarcinoma and rare and lethal cancer of the bile ducts. Okay, so we've got all of these rare cancers that people are coming down with, yeah, obscure and rare cancers. So you can come down with cancer, but I would be careful using that phrasal verb with cancer, simply because we don't usually say come down with cancer. Cancer sounds too serious and severe to use come down with, in my opinion. Usually we say come down with a cold, or come down with flu, or come down with a minor health complaint rather than something really serious like cancer. But they have used it like that here. They come down with obscure forms of the disease. They mean cancer. So there are many other strange things happening, such as patients coming down with, there it is again, coming down with multiple cancers at the same time. Yeah, they're getting cancer twice, two forms of cancer at the same time, which is obviously extremely unlucky. The pandemic forced people to isolate. Yeah, they locked us up, remember? And, sorry, I don't know what, I pressed the wrong button. They forced people to isolate and put off preventative care measures that would screen for various types of cancers out of fear of being infected. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop doing that. Out of fear of being infected. So this came up in the previous article. The pandemic forced people to lock themselves in their houses, and they didn't go to their cancer screenings, and that means that their cancers weren't detected early, and this was all out of fear of being infected by COVID. But doctors do not believe this to be the primary driver of advanced rare cancer cases. Instead, they think COVID itself is to blame, so they're blaming COVID. Let's have a look. Dr. Kashyap Patel, a North Carolina oncologist, has seen the phenomena firsthand. So if you see something firsthand, you see it directly. Yeah, if you do something firsthand, you do it directly. But you see, he has seen this phenomena firsthand. He's seen it directly. He examines the patients, so he sees the phenomena firsthand. He saw a patient in his 40s in 2021 who had a rare cancer of the bile ducts, which transport fluid produced by the liver to the small intestine. So that's a relative clause describing bile ducts. And it's not defining which bile ducts. This is just extra information about the bile ducts. Yeah, it's not defining which bile ducts. This is all bile ducts transport fluid produced by the liver to the small intestine, where it aids in the absorption and digestion of fats. This type of cancer typically affects people in their 70s and 80s. Then, multiple other patients he met with, you could just say he met. You don't need the with there, and I find it a little bit weird to put it in there. But then multiple other patients he met were diagnosed with an array of different cancers, something he said he has never seen in his 2 decades of practicing medicine. So he's never seen this before. What could have caused this? Let's investigate. One couple he investigated were Bob and Bonnie Krall of Fort Mill, South Carolina, who in a 14-month period were diagnosed with 3 types of cancer between them, despite having no family history of the disease. Mr. Krall was diagnosed with a rare, chronic blood and bone marrow cancer, while Mrs. Krall had a cancerous mass in her abdomen weighing 8.5 pounds, poor lady, according to the Washington Post. Mr. Krall later learned that several of his neighbours had the same type of cancer. It's like a cold. It seems like everyone has it. Now, of course, cancer is not usually like a cold. It's certainly not contagious. But it seems to be spreading like a cold. It's very strange. CDC data shows that more people are being told they have cancer now than they were prior to the pandemic. In 2021, 9.8% of adults reported having ever been told by a doctor that they had cancer. But in 2019, a few years earlier, that proportion of adults was only 9.5%. And remember, we have a larger population nowadays as well. So viruses have been known to accelerate cancer since the 1960s, and researchers contend that a quarter of all cancers worldwide originated with HPV, that's human papillovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, and hepatitis B. They cannot definitively rule out the COVID vaccines as playing a role, but they believe the evidence supporting the virus theory to be much stronger. There's a very important paragraph. Please take note. Lab tests suggest that coronavirus proteins can reawaken dormant cancer cells and fuel their growth, increasing the odds of being diagnosed with breast, stomach and blood cancers. Research into the links between COVID and cancer is relatively new, given the fact that the pandemic began only 4 years ago. A 2023 report in the journal Biochemy detailed different means by which the coronavirus, that's a mistake, it's a repeated word, by which the coronavirus can change genes that usually stop tumours from forming and cause widespread inflammation throughout the body. This inflammation might lead to the development of cancer cells in various organs, including the lungs, pancreas and colon. And a team in Colorado has begun probing the possibility that the coronavirus brings cancer cells to life in mice. A preprint released in April showed that when mice who had cancer previously but recovered were injected with the coronavirus, cancer cells multiplied and spread in the lungs. The flu virus was shown to do the same thing. Okay, so apparently it's perhaps flu that causes cancer. Researchers such as Dr. Ashani Weeraratne of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health were not exactly surprised by this finding. Well, I'm a little surprised. She said that it makes sense that something like influenza, remember influenza is a flu, something like the flu or COVID that triggers inflammation could change in the immune microenvironment, adding, it's rare the data are so striking. Dr. Weeraratne said mitigating risk of infection may be of particular importance. So mitigating means reducing risk. And we often talk about mitigating risk. It means always reducing risk. Yeah, just like alleviate pain or suffering means reduce, lessen pain or suffering. Mitigate risk means reduce risk. So based on the study's findings, measures adopted by vulnerable patients started in the early days of the pandemic, wearing masks, avoiding crowded places, getting vaccines, become even more important. Well, that contradicts the earlier sentence up here, doesn't it? The data shows that cancer incidence is up compared to 2019, the eve of the pandemic. That year, about 1.7 million cancer diagnoses were reported and 599,601 people died of cancer in 2019. In 2022, an estimated 1.9 million new cancer diagnoses were made, with around 609,000 cases proving fatal. So cancer is getting worse and worse and worse. It's killing more and more people. 2023 data has not yet been made available, but the projections show those cases and deaths increasing once again. The NIH estimates that nearly 2 million new cancer cases and nearly 610,000 cancer deaths are projected to occur in the US that year, but tallies are still being conducted. So tally is a count up. It's when you count something up. So they're still tallying, they're still calculating the number of deaths for 2023. Dr. Patel is now researching the connection himself. Based on data from over 300 patients, his office have logged... Surely his office has logged, yeah? His office has logged, yep, no mistake. His office has logged over 15 patients with multiple cancers, about 35 who had rare cancers, and 15 couples with new cancers since the pandemic began 4 years ago. He posited that being infected with the virus more than once has an even greater impact, as did pandemic-related stress by exacerbating whole-body inflammation that could reactivate cancer cells. Even during the first year of the COVID pandemic, up to December 31st, 2020 doctors, I think that means doctors from the year 2020, began noticing an uptick in cancer cases. So an uptick is a rise in cancer cases. That's all it means. When something is an uptick, it's a rise. So an uptick in cancer cases. A 2023 report in the journal Lancet Oncology looked at 2.4 million adults who have been diagnosed with cancer in 2018, 2019 and 2020. New cancer cases fell after the start of the pandemic, but ticked back up. An uptick, guys, yeah? In other words, increased, but increased at the end of the year. Yeah, there was a rise at the end of the year. There was an uptick at the end of the year. The odds of being diagnosed, that means the chances, guys. You get odds when you go to the bookmakers and you bet on a horse, yeah? Odds of 30 to 1, 50 to 1, 100 to 1, and they are the chances of the horse winning. So the chances of being diagnosed with an advanced stage 4 cancer was more than 7% higher in 2020 compared to the previous year. Dr. Hui-Song Han, a top researcher at the American Cancer Society and lead author of the Lancet Oncology study, said that biological mechanisms underpinning the coronavirus could be at play. Yeah, maybe. He said, I don't have the data to support this opinion. Okay, he has no data to support his idea, but it's an important question to follow up on. So when you follow up on a question, you address that question later. Yeah, you respond to that question later. So if you need to follow up on something, you need to investigate it later or report on it later. Okay, and you've got some of the comments down here. I'll just show you the top best rated one because I thought it was a reasonable comment to make. It's really easy, or it's real easy, it's a slight mistake there, but it's really easy to do a study that compares cancer rates in the vaccinated to those in the unvaccinated. I wonder why it hasn't been done.